as it turns out, one of the things that I'm really good at is procrastinating. And even in making this channel with the intent of forcing myself to actually be accountable and work on the comic, I have done everything but. I have made some tutorial videos and some introduction videos, but not actually worked on the comic. So today, that's what we're going to do and work on, I guess, the very first hurdle, which is the outline. With comics, it's a little bit different than writing, for example, a book or film, because there's a lot of different segments. Infinite and Momentary isn't going to be an ongoing comic, but one of the things that you might think about for ongoings is within the full 1,000 issues of Detective Comics, within that there's arcs that are 4-6 issue stories that break down the wider storyline of Batman or whatever. So in that way, it's a little bit more akin to a TV show. For Infinite and Momentary, my plan is to do a 6-issue arc with the potential to expand it further from that point. So I have an idea of where it begins and where it ends, but I don't know where each issue falls in that. And that is what the plan is today, to figure that out. So I have some sticky notes and I have a notebook. And one of the reasons I like using sticky notes is that you can move them if you decide that you want to move them in different places. Initially, when I created Infinite and Momentary, my plan was to have it be a webtoon. And so I have written a couple of episodes of that, and actually it is available in webtoon if you wanted to read it. But it's a bit old right now, and it's a bit outdated, and it's not going to follow the plot as it is currently. But one of the main differences between the webcomic, specifically Infinite Scroll webcomic, and a traditional comic, is that 1, you're not constrained by a page number, and 2, each episode of a webcomic is more like a beat rather than a full story. Or not necessarily like a full story, but a substantial chunk of the arc that you're trying to tell. So what I had written for episode 1 of Infinite and Momentary will be good for an issue 1, if that makes sense. And the story's changed quite a bit since then anyway. So we all know how stories go. You have a start and it finishes somewhere. So we've got the start of Infinite and Momentary. The start of Infinite and Momentary, which has to introduce Thea and what her goals are. So something that I find personally helpful is to start with my logline so that I always have an anchor of what I'm trying to achieve. For Infinite and Momentary, my logline is Infinite and Momentary is a comic about an idealistic trainee who desperately wants to become a pro hero and must face a decision between exposing the truth about the most powerful hero organization or reaching her dream of debuting but become a cog in the system. So the point here is to highlight in a very high level summary what the main conflict is. So within that, you can tell what Thea wants. She wants to become a pro hero, but what's going to stop her is her own morals, because she's idealistic. And that's core conflict in the comic. Everything else is just like fluff to that core concept. So when the ending has to be her, basically the climax of her decision, what's she going to choose? Is she going to become a pro hero with Pantheon, or is she going to choose what she believes is right instead? So in issue 1, I have to set up that conflict in the first place. What I was unclear about when I first started was whether I wanted it to be super obvious that Pantheon is corrupt, or not necessarily corrupt, but like their intentions aren't as pure as they might lead you to believing. So one of the things that I need to include is an intro to how training works in this world, or how becoming a hero works, being a hero works. One of my inspirations, I guess you would say, is I'm a massive K-pop fan, and notoriously the trainee system in K-pop is horrendous, and it's all about perfection and really wiping out, I don't want to say getting rid of people's individuality, but like molding them into what the idol company needs them to be. And so that's how Pantheon works as well. Pro heroes, celebrity levels, there's like hero rankings, there's idol awards, there's hero awards, and that sort of thing. And so that is where that's going. So for the first issue, I think that's something that will work, is starting with like a training exercise that's being broadcast to the world. If you are a K-pop fan, you might know about survival shows, which are basically these big productions where they have a billion young hopeful idols or idols in training compete to debut basically by the end of it. So that's kind of the concept there, but instead of singing, dancing, rapping, it's going to be fighting giant robots and other miscellaneous tasks. So I think that's probably where I'll likely start. That won't be the full first issue, which is where if I was to do Webtoon again, I probably would have the first episode be just like training arc or whatever. From there, without giving away too much, Thea is going to struggle and fail on the big stage, if that makes sense. But not in her opinion, but in the eyes of the public and in the eyes of Pantheon, she's going to fail, which is on my happy sticky note. From there, something happens, but I need to introduce Coven, which is Coven is going to be an antagonistic force to Pantheon, so they are an underground group right now, but at some point they are going to reveal themselves and call themselves the Seekers of Truths or something along those lines, and basically put Pantheon on notice that they're coming for them. I don't know that necessarily falls into issue 1, but I do need to have somewhere in the first issue Coven introduced, even if it's like just a glimpse into like a HQ while they're watching the trials. Something that I once read when I've read a lot of books on writing for TVs, shows and stuff like that. Something that I once read, and I don't think that this necessarily holds completely true, but in your pilot, so in this case your first issue, you should introduce a lot of the concepts that are going to be important in the whole arc. Something that makes me think of that is if you've ever read Trial of Magneto, I won't spoil it. The whole series is about finding out who killed Scarlet Witch. The person who ends up being the murderer does not appear until it's revealed that he's the murderer. So there's no chance that you could have figured out that it was him. And personally, it was a very unsatisfying ending. So that's something that I don't know that would necessarily be the case for Coven, but I think I want to reveal them somewhere in the first issue. How that's going to look, I don't know. The other thing that has to happen is introducing the other two main characters, Ignite and Magnitude, who are pro heroes currently. Ignite is on the route to becoming the Rookie of the Year in the Hero Awards. He's recently debuted. He's very popular. He is a foil to Thea. Thea is very chaotic and uncontrolled. He's all about holding yourself back and not letting your emotions dictate anything because of his own past trauma, which is a whole other thing. And then Magnitude is his partner, who is also super cool. Her powers are around super strength, and she has set a bunch of records for the idol training, the hero training sessions. And so they are going to be introduced. I have an idea of how I want to introduce them and their dynamic, as buddy cop is the wrong word, but like where again Ignite is very cold, calm, collected. Magnitude is got that like sardonic, happy-go-lucky feel about her, and so there's conflict there too. Both of them are very different from Thea, and obviously they're pro heroes, so that's also different. From there, what needs to happen in the first issue is setting up the central conflict of Pantheon being the polished face of order and being more about optics and actual heroism. So I'm going to need something to happen there. So I'm going to say order versus instinct. I think that makes sense. So like, instead of necessarily following orders or following what Pantheon wants her to do, she's going to do something that she believes in her heart is the right thing to do, but it's against what Pantheon wants her to do. And that's also going to set her up as part of her personality, which is act first, think later. And also she has a bit of a reckless streak. She doesn't really think about consequences. It's probably one of her big flaws, is that she just jumps in and goes full throttle without thinking about the ramifications to collateral damage and also to herself. So that's things that I need to set up in issue 1. I'm not going to talk too much about what's going to happen towards the end of the series, because I think those are all the cool things that I need to do for issue 1, which is what we're working on. But I think that will be a good segue into it. I think if I was planning a more succinct story, So for example, a 4-arc issue or something like that, I think I'd be more inclined to figure out exactly what's going to happen in each one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my beautiful structure on Clip Studio, because I have basically each of the pages planned out and what needs to go into each page. So with comics, another way that it differs from any other storytelling medium is that pages are how you're telling the story. So one of the things that I want to think about is I want reveals to be on a page turn, so that readers turn the page and go, oh, instead of like if you're reading on the left page and then the big reveals on the right page, that you're not like, oh, well, that's spoiled. But I'll read this still. So that's one of the things to think about. So I have all 32 pages here, and I'm just going to plot out each of the points that I want to put in each page. And then from there, I'm going to write the script, which I am a little bit concerned about, because I think writing is probably my weakest strength in terms of what I'm working on here. But that is the next step. So I'll show you a glimpse of what my page structure looks like right now. And I've split it, I just color coded each page as well to be like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, so that I could plot the structures pretty easily. Something else that I like to use is the Save the Cat website has a really good breakdown of where you can put major story beats for like complete story. But something to think about is with it being more like a TV show, there's different TV shows, right? So you have like TV shows that are basically just movies that have been split into 4 parts. So if you think about something like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's kind of like a movie that was split, versus, for example, One Division. Each episode had full arc in it, and then that played into the larger arc. So that's 2 different ways to see it. I think for Infinite and Momentary, I think what would work well is almost like a combo of them, because there needs to be a bit of a monster of the week feeling, and then that plays into the larger picture of Theo figuring out how she feels about Pantheon and all this shenanigans. So that's the vibe that I'm going for, but I want readers to be able to buy issue 1 and feel like they haven't just read half a story and be excited for the next issue. So that's my plan. And hopefully that was helpful insight into this. I don't know how great these vlogs are going to be, or if they're like entertaining in the least, but I have my beautiful sticky notes here, and I'm just going to rearrange them so that I know what I'm doing in issue 1. And then I guess the next step is writing, and then from there I'll do the thumbnails, and then from thumbnails it's pencils to inks to colors. Where I am stressed is in lettering. Lettering is not a skill I have at all. So if you are a letterer, or you letterers, let me know, because I will definitely be paying someone to letter the comic, because it's just, I've tried, it's just really not, it's not a skill I have. So is that. But that sounds pretty exciting. It sounds like, I feel like I'm on the right track. I'm wondering if 6 months is too, it's easy to say now in week 1. I'm wondering if 6 months is too long a goal for the first issue, and if it is, then I'll expand it to being for the full, or issue 2. We'll see. We're just gonna go with it and see how it goes, but hopefully that was a good insight into plotting for my comic. And if you want to continue to follow along with the journey, feel free to subscribe and like and all those shenanigans, and let me know what you thought or anything that you're working on. And that is me. And stay tuned for whatever videos come next. All right.